Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us all here tonight for Telos Live. It's great to see so many of you and a lot of familiar faces popping in. I am keeping just a lookout on my computer because there's still people popping in our little waiting room. But thank you for joining us and great for you to be here. So before we start, I'm just going to bring in my co-pilot for tonight, the lovely Ella. So let me bring her in. Ella, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight with such a cold weather. Here we have a cold weather and it's very windy. So I hope my Wi-Fi will be okay.
I'm
If
sure it
not,
will.
you will cover me.
That's right. Usually it's my Wi-Fi that always plays up, and usually towards the end of the session. But look, if you can hear us tonight, I just want to make sure the audio is coming through. But can a few of you just give me a wave? Just let me know if it's coming through okay. Fantastic. So look, welcome to Telos Live, and it's a great session that we've really got planned for you tonight in this next hour that we're together. In a moment, we will be kind of bringing in our speaker for tonight and our guest. But what I'd like to do is probably just give you a bit of an overview of what Telos is and Telos Live is all about. Now, for those of you new, Ella and myself, we really kind of started the Flame of Eternal Light Spiritual Center probably about 2.5 years ago when we were guided by Spirit. And we kind of felt there was a need to bring together heart-centered, conscious, spiritual people who are growing in their awareness and ascending in their vibration and energy. But most of all, that really come from the heart and that want to share from the heart. And so over the last 2.5 years, this lovely community of people, mainly around Victoria, has been growing. And we've had connections this year with even one of the teachers from Israel who runs a center called Telos there. And we've had others from Sydney come in and also share on the Telos Live. And so the purpose of tonight is really to just invite other spiritual teachers, because there's so much, there's a wealth of amazing knowledge and information that people have. And we wanted to bring in other teachers as well as ourselves to share that, because some of these spiritual practices, some of this essence is becoming a bit of a lost art. And so tonight we're really excited to have you with us. And before we start, I just wanted to share with you how tonight will actually run, and then we'll get in and introduce a lovely guest for the night. And tonight is very different to a lot of our open classes, our meditations and workshops, in that tonight, most of you will be in the background. You'll be muted. You'll still be able to see Ellen, myself, and our guest speaker, Gaylene, tonight. And we'll be presenting on the screen in more of a question and answer format with Gaylene. So what we do encourage you to do is that if you do have questions, please type them in the chat. If anything pops up and you'd like to ask Gaylene later or ask Ella or myself, type them in the chat, and then I and Ella will moderate them along the way. And towards the end of the night, we'll open up the screen and you'll all be able to then connect with Gaylene, myself, and Ella and ask any of those questions, and we'll go through them. So hopefully that all works for you. And we will also see during the middle if there's also some questions as well. I'm sure there will be. So tonight, what I'd like to do before we actually begin is just introduce our lovely guest for tonight. And, you know, I've known Gaylene, I don't know for how many years now, she'll probably remind me, but I think it's probably about a good 8 or 9 years through the Victorian Spiritualist Union. But Gaylene has really been working in the spirit world really since 1989, where she was connected with the Brunswick Spiritual Lyceum Church. And since then, she has really kind of dedicated her life to mediumship, connecting with loved ones in spirit, and also being a teacher, a spiritual teacher. And as you may have seen, Gaylene's, I suppose, part of the area she specialized in, or spirit guided her to specialize in, and I know she'll have a laugh at that, is this area of physical phenomenon or physical mediumship. And we will talk about that tonight. You know, what are some of the differences? What is spiritual or physical phenomena, and what is mental mediumship? And she's really developed that and been working with groups with that for many years. And she's also the vice president currently of the Victorian Spiritualist Union, and does some great work there with her husband, George, in terms of facilitating some of the teachings and the lessons and the sharing. And I came across Gaylene's story, which I'm hoping she's going to share tonight. She's got a very lovely story she told one day in one of the sessions. And I remembered it and I thought, we need to get Gaylene to come and share. So I'm going to bring Gaylene in, and let's give Gaylene a little bit of a welcome. And you might give her a little clap on screen. Thank you for joining us, Gaylene.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you. We've got a few that have been very interested, obviously, in tonight and hearing more about, I suppose, the topic of this physical phenomena and also spiritual manifestation. So I'm excited as well to learn a bit more about this. But maybe a good place to start with is, Gaylene, like what got you on your journey and connected to, I suppose, mediumship and spiritualism?
It started sort of for me. George and I lost our daughter when she was 4 years old, and I was looking for, I had nothing to do with spiritualism at the time, and so I started to look around, and we ended up at Brunswick, and I met a lady there, the Reverend Faye Fretwell, and you usually had to sit for about 6 weeks before you were invited into a class, but after the second night, she invited me into her class. So I sat there for 5 years. All I wanted to do was healing. And that was more or less a healing group where she was. And from there, I decided one day that I would ask her if I could take my own group. And this was about 5 years into my meditations. And she said, yes, you can start in January. Now, that was December, so it was a real, oh, gosh, really? But anyway, I also changed from her group to Reverend Lynette Deer's group at that stage. And I sat with Lynn for 5 years, and she was a brilliant medium. We only lost her last year, and she was my teacher for 5 years and a great friend. And from there, I started to become aware that Spirit was leading me in a different direction and that I would be doing clairvoyance. So I started there working on the rostrums. And I suppose it was about 10 years after that, Lynn and I decided that because we were taking our own groups, we didn't get a chance to meditate. And that's where all this started. We decided to start a group, and I said, well, come to our place. So there were 7 of us sat, and we were going to just sit and meditate. Spirit had other ideas, of course. And so from there, it sort of led on to becoming involved in healing, because one of our members was very ill at the time. And so we started to give healing to him. And I believe that the healing energy must have something to do with the actual manifestation and with the physical phenomena. Because after a couple of months of giving healing to this beautiful gentleman, we started to hear knocking in the room, and it was quite loud. So we started asking questions, and from there it became obvious that it was going to change, and it became a manifestation circle with Lynn as the physical medium, and the rest of us were giving power to her. So that's sort of my story as to where it all started. So spirit led us.
It's interesting, Gaylene, it started with the healing. I mean, why do you think that was? I mean, obviously for a lot of people, we're called into different parts of spiritual work, but obviously healing is a huge aspect, I think, for everyone to develop and work with that gift to open their channel. I mean, is that what you've found in working with your groups?
I think so. Yes, I feel that that's very important. I sort of had a funny idea of healing. I thought that the healers were able to give the healing. Well, we don't, of course, Spirit gives it. But I felt that that was completely different to the clairvoyance and the other forms of mediumship. But as we went along, I realised, and Lynn said to me one day, she said, you realise that clairvoyance is also a healing. And, of course, after getting a lot of messages myself through other mediums from our daughter, I realised that it was a healing sort of phenomena as well. And this is where I feel that this came into this class here, was that Bruce was very, very sick with cancer, and we were giving him this healing, and the healing energy that built within this room, I believe that that sort of worked in to start to have this phenomena happen. And that's when Lynn decided that she would go into the trance and we'd look for the physical stuff in our group, which we got lots of it. Yeah.
And probably just one question, and then I'll hand to Ella, because I'm sure I'm getting the sense, I'm picking up that Ella's going to have a question soon. But maybe Gaylene, can you just tell people, because often people are not aware of the difference between what is physical mediumship and the difference between physical mediumship and mental mediumship. And I think that's an important distinction.
There definitely is. With mental phenomena or mental mediumship, that's where your mind is still quite aware of what's going on. Spirit will work more on the intuitive part of your mind, and that is where you do the clairvoyance from the rostrum, things like that. That's where mediumship comes in on the mental side of it. With physical, they use your mind, but most of the time the physical medium is in a trance. Now, there's different forms of trance. You've got the very deep trance, which Lynn was a deep trance medium. I don't tend to go that deep. I'm in a very light sort of trance where I'm aware of what's going on, but Spirit will use my voice to speak through me, or they will use your actual ectoplasm that builds up to build the phenomena that happens. And the ectoplasm is taken from the medium. If you're in deep trance, you're not aware of what's going on. And Lynn wasn't in the beginning, but as that developed, she could then sit, and we didn't need to go into that deep meditation. But it took a long time. And with that, Spirit uses your actual subconscious, if you like, rather than your conscious mind. And so it takes a lot more trust. You've got to have, one of the things that we were very much aware of, that no one was to be in the physical circle with us unless they had sat for at least 5 years in a development circle and had learned how to control the spirit communication. This is very important that you actually control that. You can't just let it keep happening 24 hours a day. You'd end up so tired you wouldn't know what you were doing. So that's sort of the difference. Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. And we'll add a bit more, because I think as we unfold tonight, we'll be talking a bit more about these different aspects of it.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'll come to Ella. Ella, do you have a question for Gaylene?
I have plenty of questions. Thank you.
I'm sure you are. I could hear your ears pricking up with healing and ectoplasm and all these topics.
Okay, so from my understanding, you started to sit in the circle where you meditated and you concentrated on the spiritual healing.
Yes.
And that took you, without any preparation to channel, straight into the physical mediumship.
Yes, that was after 10 years of sitting.
Just listen in, everybody, because I know there's some people who think, this practice and work with spirit happens immediately.
Oh, yeah.
10 years of sitting sometimes.
Well, there was sort of 10 years, 5 years in the healing group, 5 years in the other meditation group and taking my own group. And then we sat in our meditation here, and it would have been about 3 or 4 years before we started to actually get anything. But we'd built right up through the other classes before we sat with the physical. So, yeah, look, it can take years. You can sit there for years and years. I know Reverend Dominic will tell you he sat for a long, long time before he had any form of physical mediumship at all. So, yeah, it's not an overnight thing.
It actually showed me, because I really thought you need to practice channeling and you need to develop contact, very close contact with your guide, but
That's
you need
right.
to develop this trust, unconditional trust, because when you're going to trance and when you're going to channeling, basically you don't have influence what's coming through, right? So, but your case, it's showing me that all you need to do, you just need to meditate every day.
No, sorry, I've misled you, Ella. No, you're right. It does take all that time to have the trust with your guide, to learn to recognise the energies that will come in with your guide. It takes a long time of that first. This class that we started here, we were already taking our own classes and we were already had the contact with guides.
Yeah.
So no, it's not a good thing to try it without it. You've got to have that trust.
Did you use the cabinet, or you just
No.
were sitting in the circle in the dark room with one red little light?
To begin with, I'm sitting in the room at the moment that we sat in. It's a small bedroom that used to be a bedroom. It's now the meditation room. But we sat in complete darkness when we started to go for the phenomena. To begin with, I had to black out the windows. I had to really prepare. And it took, I suppose, about 3 or 4 years of sitting in complete darkness. And then we could actually have the light on, and we'd have a red light so that we could see what was going on around us. So it did take a long time.
And Gaylene, just for people, you know, like they may not be aware what physical phenomena is in terms of there's different ways. So physical phenomena is basically the spirit world talking through physical means or bringing through energy in a physical matter.
That's right.
Or means. Yeah. And there's different forms of it in terms of how it manifests. So, you know, could you just share a couple of what are some of the main ways that, you know, and maybe not necessarily in your group, but other mediums too have actually experienced this?
In our group, we experience the apports, which are objects which are dropped into the room. And usually what happens there is that you get a very loud bang. It sounds like the roof's coming in. And then you will find the objects in the room when you come back. That's the apports. There's the table moving, which we've also tried here, where we would put our hands onto the table. You could feel the energy and the table would move and rock. So that's sort of the table wrapping. You've got direct voice, which we only heard once. It was behind me, we heard a voice. And with that, direct voice, we did have a trumpet. They didn't use that. They would speak from outside. It would sort of be like on the roof, as if somebody was speaking from on the roof. And we heard about a sentence of that. And that's another form of it, which is direct voice. And the other form, which I haven't experienced, is the actual full manifestation of a spirit person. And years ago, they used to be able to do that. They'd use the ectoplasm, which is a sort of a sticky substance that they take from the spirit and from the medium, the physical medium, and they will build that into a form. And they can actually build it into a really good likeness of your loved ones. And I've heard that people can actually touch it, and when they're invited to, they can touch the ectoplasm, and it feels like a real person. It's actually, everyone can see it.
And it's an interesting one to talk about, this ectoplasm, and I'm going to show people a bit of a picture of an example of that in a little while, because I think you need to see it to understand it. But basically it was where the mediums, obviously the bodily substances and the energy would transmute into a substance that would often come out of different parts of the medium's body and then could be shaped. So some of them shaped voice boxes and others into, you know, like you said, into loved ones and other things. So
that's
quite amazing work. And I mean, you know, you can imagine back when this started, and I'm going to give you all a bit of a history lesson in a moment, but back in this was all the late 1800s, that people would have been quite bemused watching, seeing and experiencing some of this. Yeah. So fascinating. Gaylene, you know, before we move on, obviously physical phenomenon, physical mediumship doesn't happen as much. We don't see as much. That's just my awareness, as compared to seeing mental mediums who are up on a platform and using, clairvoyance and using the mind to connect with spirit. Do you feel there's any reason why that is? You know, like obviously it was very prevalent in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, but now we're not really connecting or seeing so much. So any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I really think that what's happened is that in those early days, the mediums didn't live very long. They seem to have been using the own ectoplasm to build this manifestation, because it was very prevalent around the Second World War and the First World War, you know, when they had lost loved ones, and people needed proof that they could see. And I believe now that Spirit has realised that it takes too much out of the medium. We've learned too that you shouldn't be sitting more than once a fortnight. You have to have the dedication to sit once a fortnight. At the same time, you make an appointment with Spirit. It's like coming into your Zoom. You know, you've got to make that appointment. And I think that what's happened is that Spirit now realises that people now are more likely to trust a medium who will give them proof of their loved ones beyond doubt, and they don't seem to need that anymore. And I think that the mediums too, they didn't live very long. Most of them didn't, especially if anyone ever gets hold of a book about Helen Duncan. That was a fantastic story, and something that if you want to learn more about physical mediumship, read her book. She was a brilliant medium, but she died because somebody came in, and I think it was the police actually raided it, and she collapsed and she died a few days later. So it's I believe that Spirit realises that they don't want to take that out of mediums anymore.
Yeah.
The Apports don't take as much energy.
Yes.
They seem to be just brought through, not easily, but they seem to just come through without having to use the medium's ectoplasm and their own energies.
And I'll just repeat again, you know, so for those who aren't aware, an apport is basically an object that actually has been brought in from the spirit world or from another dimension, the spirit world, into the physical plane. So often the mediums will have these drop in the room, or they'll be present and they weren't there before. Okay, so it's not like somebody's moved it around from another part of the house. They actually have just come in, and so it's quite amazing. And I suppose it's real evidence and proof, isn't it, really? I mean, you see something like that, your life is changed, you know?
It definitely is. I mean, we've had so many apports that were given to us, you know, that they're not monetary worth anything, but to us they're worth more than gold. They really are. They're beautiful objects.
And we'll save your story about what you're going to share with us, the one, you know which one I'm talking about, for a little later. Just keep people interested so they'll stay on and keep listening.
Yes.
But look, what I'd like to do, actually, before I do, I'll just come back to Ella if Ella's got any other questions for you, and then I'll go into just share with people a little bit of the history of this physical mediumship before we come back to Gaylene.
Thank you, Les. I just wonder about the apports. What is the difference between apports and the physical manifestation? Because it looks like when you're doing physical manifestation, then you're using ectoplasm. You're creating ectoplasm. But with apport, I kind of feel that's what they're telling me. The spirit world, the guides will use your energy, and it will work through your mind, right? Is it correct?
Yeah, I believe it is, to a certain extent. What I believe is that the energy is built within the room. I mean, the way we ran the circle, we had one medium who was an absolutely brilliant singer. So we would sing and build that energy up. And when you build the energy up within the room, it's spirit energy and the medium's energy that's used. And it's actually proven now through quantum physics that nothing's solid. So what they can do is bring the apport through a solid wall and drop it into the room, using that energy to part the atoms, I guess you'd say, to be able to get them through into the room. So they can use the medium's mind, you're right there, Ella, but they really use the energy that's built within that room, as I understand it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good.
No, thanks.
So everyone, what I'd like to do, and we'll open up in a little bit for some questions after I do a little bit of a sharing, but what I'd like to do is just give you a bit of background on some of the history behind this, because there's some fascinating stories, and I also like to get Gaylene's spin on it. And she's already mentioned one person I want to share a little bit about, which is Helen Duncan. And again, by all means, go and do your own research, go and do your own study, but hopefully this will awaken a bit of interest. I know it did awaken interest for me. So I'm just going to share my screen and a couple of slides. So look, where did a lot of this begin? I mean, there may have been evidence of, I suppose, physical phenomena before the late 1800s, but around 1849, there were three sisters, Kate, Leah, and Margaretta, the Fox sisters, who in a little town in Rochester, New York, started, using a bit of a table and using a wall to connect with spirit. And there was what Gaylene mentioned were the rappings, And so in Hydesville, in a little town, they would try and connect, obviously, with the spirit world. And kind of set off this blaze of an interest in spiritualism across America that then went to the UK. And then probably by about the 1920s, there were meant to be at least about 20,000 or more, 200,000 people in the UK alone who had some interest in this spiritualism. And as Gaylene said, one part of the physical phenomena was actually using a table. And sometimes the table would rock because spirit were moving it. And one of my teachers I sat in a class with, we tried several times with the table tipping. And then one night, I can tell you very clearly, this card table simply walked around the room. And by the end of it, this table was all broken. And we were just quite amazed. And just seeing that and feeling that, you go, okay, there's more to this world than what we're taught to believe. So, that's where it kind of started with these Fox sisters. If we move into the 1920s, we start to hear stories about these two people, Harry Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, those of you who might be aware or maybe not aware, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was the great author. He was the author of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And in World War I, he lost his son, Kingsley. He and his wife, Jean, they lost their son, died. And as a lot of people who entered into spiritualism, he started to have an interest. His wife started to connect with the spirit world as a medium. He actually invested, in today's terms, millions of dollars and millions of pounds towards the cause of spiritualism and promoting it. And he also wrote many books on this topic of spiritualism. But one of the things that happened along the way was this young Hungarian man by the name of Houdini, who was living in America. Now, Houdini believed obviously in magic and illusion and didn't believe in the spirit world. So these two almost became rivals in a way, but that pushed each other. And Houdini would often question the whole world of spiritualism and say it was fake, it was skepticism. And so Arthur Conan Doyle and his wife would often try to prove that it wasn't. And they had this huge rivalry that went on. And several times Houdini tried to diminish that work. So interesting that this story was going on in the 1920s. This is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is a picture that was taken of him. And obviously another way that spirit manifests is in photos. And you can see that in this photo, the image of a lady in the spirit world was coming through behind him. Yeah? So interesting era. And also, if we kind of take note, as Gaylene mentioned, in the 1920s, 1940s, what was happening in the world? There were the world wars and people were losing loved ones. And there were all these people connected with spiritualism who were starting to bring through messages and starting to connect with the spirit world. We will talk to Gaylene about this one in a moment when we bring her back. But, one of the things they used to do, and you probably heard Ella mention about sitting in a cabinet. And a cabinet was like a screen, or it could be a physical cabinet, and they would put the medium behind it and it'd be all in darkness. But one of the things they would also do is tie the medium up with all these ropes and different things, because they wanted to prove that the medium was actually bringing through spirit and wasn't actively using tricks or parlor tricks or magic or illusion to do it. So it's amazing the extents they went through. Like, even if you see this guy, they've put a bell in his mouth. So if he moved, you'd hear the bell ringing and you know, he's up to something. But it was a big era for skeptics in that time, as well as those who were really bringing spirit through. And it kind of brings us 1944, interesting year. Again, we're thinking about wartime. This is Helen Duncan. She was, as Gaylene mentioned, an amazing Scottish medium and brought through a lot of great evidence. What you see in her mouth that almost sometimes looks like cheesecloth is actually the ectoplasm. So this is her physically connecting with physical mediumship and bringing through the energy that manifests in a form that in this case was coming out of her mouth and bringing things through. Now, again, a lot of skeptics have kind of said there's no such thing as ectoplasm, it's just cheesecloth. And there's all sorts of other ways you can do it. Yet, as Gaylene mentioned, there's a lot of mediums out there who have actually connected and brought this through. The interesting thing for all of you who have a connection with England, you'll be interested in this, is that Helen Duncan was the last person to ever be convicted in the UK under the Witchcraft Act. But let me share you the story of why. Because, you know, see, prior to her being convicted, she did a reading for a group of people and she brought through a sailor. The sailor came in from spirit and started telling her about this boat that had been sunk in the middle of the war, and that this boat had sunk and everybody had died and had been hidden and kept a secret. And Helen brought this out. Now, what happened was the UK government found out about what she was saying. And in truth, there was a boat. There was a British naval vessel that had been bombed and actually sunk on behalf. And the British Navy had kept it top secret and quiet. And so they couldn't understand, how could Helen know this? How could Helen have any idea that this had happened? And so in order to try and shut her up, to stop her from speaking about any other truth that would come through, they basically convicted her and obviously put her in jail under this Witchcraft Act. But interesting, she was the last one to actually be convicted. And the last one I want to share with you, which is one I really love, little story here, is about this gentleman. His name's Marcello Bacci. And Marcello lived in this, and he still lives in this little village in Italy called Grosseto. And he was always interested in the paranormal, interested in mediumship, interested in the spirit world. And he started to play along with this little valve radio that you can see in front of us. Now, the interesting thing is, as Marcello played with this radio, sometimes he would tune into channels and voices would come through. Voices of loved ones from the other side. And so for all the years since the 1960s, he's still sitting in his little Italian place, you know, or used to sit there and bring through the loved ones of people from different villages. And there he would, all he would do as a medium, he wouldn't basically be speaking, he wouldn't be on a platform, he just tuned the radio and the voices from the other side came through. The interesting thing about him is that the universities have done such amazing research to try and find out what's really going on. They went to the extent in one university study of taking him and his radio and putting him in what they call a magnetic shield or shell that is in a physics department that blocks out all radio frequency. So no radio frequency can ever get into this cell. It's made out of copper. They plugged Marcello's radio into the PowerPoint. They put him in front of it. They tuned the dial, knowing no other signals from outside could come in, and still the voices came through. So they became smart. Okay, what happens if we take the valves out? So they took the valves out of the radio. Still the voices came through. The next thing they did was they actually took the PowerPoint and pulled the plug out, and still the voices came through. Okay. The only time the voices did not come through was when Marcello was not in the room with his radio. So, you know, I just find these kind of fascinating kind of examples. I just wanted to share them because I think it kind of brings a bit of context to what our topic is tonight around this. So hopefully that's useful to people and gives you a bit of interest. But Gaylene, anything you want to share, like from what I've just shared, anything else that you felt was important about this kind of history and what's happened?
You've covered most of it. And funnily enough, Dominic Listro was on the rostrum at the VSU on Sunday talking about that gentleman with his radio in the Faraday cage.
Yes.
So, yeah, and that was something brilliant. You know, it's interesting to see that different mediums have a different, I guess, if you want to call them gifts, to be able to bring through this different phenomena. It's they don't seem to be able to explain how it works. You know, no medium can say to you, well, I sit there and I do this and that and something else. They just go into this very deep trance, and that ectoplasm is something that was very much around during the war, where a lot of mediums were actually getting that ectoplasm around. It's interesting to sort of know that people were, so fascinated by this, and yet there were so many skeptics. So
exactly.
People trying to prove it wasn't real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no.
And I think, one thing I love about this aspect of spiritualism, and it's something I'm going to share at my talk on Saturday too, is that, the whole philosophy is not about telling you what to believe, but about you finding your own evidence and belief through your own experience. And I know you've had experiences, which we're going to go into in a moment, some powerful ones. But I know for each of the people here who are listening, you'll have your own evidence, you'll have your own experiences. And when you receive that, and the more you get closer to spirit, and you feel their love, you feel their connection, you feel the power of healing, the more that's going to unfold. So, yeah.
That's right.
So, Gaylene, I thought what we'll do, and Ella's going to take some of these questions in this area, but I really wanted people, obviously we can't teach people tonight how to do physical phenomena. It's like a 10-year curriculum.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or maybe more.
Maybe more. But what I felt we could do is take a couple of principles that I think are relevant to it and things that people here tonight can take away for their life. So I'm just going to show a slide of that, and then we'll just go into some questions about these areas, and maybe you can help bring your guidance and your light to them. So I'll just share that on the screen, and people can maybe take a note down of some of these areas. So look, if you do have a pen tonight and some paper, just take these down, because we are going to chat to Gaylene about these in a moment. The essence of spiritual protection in doing this work. The essence of intentionality and having intention when we work with the spirit world. Consistency and commitment, how is that important? The essence of prayer, which is a very powerful one, especially in this work too, and the energy of it. Energetic alignment or blending with the spirit world, like blending our energies, raising our frequency and vibration and allowing ourselves to connect. And the last one that came to me, which Spirit told me to put in, which was very important, is integrity, spiritual integrity in this work. So hopefully if you've taken those down, they're some of the key areas we're going to explore. And like I said, at the end, we'll open up to everyone. And if there's any questions, we'll have an open sharing. So look, hopefully you've got those down. But Ella, over to you if you want to ask and take us through, and we'll look at the first ones.
Thank you, Les. So would you like to share with us, please, about protocol of practice as far as the protection is concerned? Probably this is the number one in your practice before you're going to do anything.
Yeah, the main thing that you've got to remember is that when you go into working with spirit, you need to put in your own protection. Even if you have a leader who is protecting you, you need to have your own protection. And the way you do that is to make this connection with your guide that you totally trust them. It's like a friend that you've known for years. And the protection that I usually use is just a little prayer. I'll say a little prayer, and please bring only the highest of teaching guides, healing guides and loved ones into the room. And we ask that God protects us and that our spirit guides protect us. Yeah. So that's the basis of protection. I mean, that's a very quick explanation. But that takes a little while to sit and to speak with your guides and to put that protection around each one of you and around the group.
Yeah. And Gaylene, can I just ask, because I know there's other teachers out there who say, oh, I don't do protection because I just believe I'm protected. You know, there's that
That's
mindset.
true.
And then there's those I know who do a lot because, I mean, I do it personally. I bring them in because I feel for me, I want to have that sense of, protection and grace, because that's what they bring in with them. But is that what you believe, or do you feel that way too?
Very much so, Liz. That was the way I was taught. And I know there are people who don't think about that protection. But for me, I think it's important, especially if you're going to go into physical phenomena or into the working actual of, even with healing, it's very important that you protect yourself, because you've got to have that trust and faith that they are, or not faith, you've got to have the belief that the guides are going to be there and they're going to look after you. Yeah. Because if you don't do that, you can become very overwhelmed and you can find that you're getting very tired, you'll be drained. You should never, ever feel drained when you come out of a session of any sort of meditation or development group. You should always feel uplifted. And that's why I think this protection is so important. Yeah. You call them in, you're inviting them, the same as you'd invite a friend.
Yeah, excellent. So for
Isn't
everybody,
it important because you do not want to have anyone step into your energy except your guide?
There are others come in as well as your guide. Yeah. So, but the way I work, and maybe not everybody works this way, but the way I work is I ask my guide to step in. The minute that I feel him, I then hand it over to him and I say, bring in who's needed for the night. So it depends. If you're doing a healing, your healing guide will come through. Mm-hmm. So they allow that. I guess it's a group of spirit guides that come in. So yeah, not just one, but is that sort of what you meant, Ella, with that?
I agree with you what you said, but what I was trying to ask you, because I know from my experience that you can have just wanderer walking around and see the light and step into my energy. So obviously I will protect myself, and I use quite a few methods of protection, very strong protection. So I don't need to deal with this. For me, this is just negative energy. So
that's right. Yeah, it's very, very rare to have a spirit who is evil, if you want to say, for better word. But there are people who are lost, or not lost. That's the wrong word too, because you don't get lost in the spirit world. There's always someone there to help you. But there are people or energies that can come into your surroundings if you don't protect yourself. And that's one of the parts of my protection too. I always say, if there is anyone who needs help that is coming to the light or coming to me tonight, please wrap them in love and take them to the spirit world. Because I feel sometimes that they just don't know what they're doing.
That's right, yeah.
So it's not a negative energy more than anything.
Yeah, and that whole area is a topic for another conversation.
That's right.
Rescuing souls and
one.
helping them over into the light. Gaylene, like obviously in terms of sitting in physical phenomena, you need to be intentional. But I think, obviously whenever we sit in a spiritual group in our development, you need to hold an intention. I mean, so do you feel that's important in your teaching? Like, is that what you've encouraged with your groups and your students?
Yes, I do. I think that it's really important to have that intention. If you just can't, having said that, Liz, I find that quite a few of the people that come into my development group, they need to be healed themselves first. Yeah. They may have had some trauma. So having said that, I allow them that time to heal. And then I ask them to, when you're coming into this group, you've got an intention that you want to sit in spirit's energy. You want to sit with the highest.
Yes.
And you want to sit with your loved ones. But that's my way of saying that's your intention. Yeah. You're coming in there to heal yourself, but to sit in the presence with spirit and your loved ones and your guides.
Yeah. And I think that healing aspect's coming out again very strongly. It is about
Very much.
healing self first to feel comfortable enough to then be able to
That's right.
hold that energy and build that connection with your guides and to feel that.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because from my experience with the guides and the ones that work with us, and you mentioned there's a group, I call them a team. There's a team usually,
Team, yeah.
and they usually have different roles. Like some will help with your speaking, some will help with writing, some are,
That's right.
I was hoping for some would help me with my singing on Friday night at karaoke, but when it came to Tom Jones, they didn't help me with my singing. But yeah, sometimes we have guides that, with different roles.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, I'd like to find my singing guide too. But yeah, no, it is. It's interesting to know why people come into development groups. And I find that and that's a development group rather than a physical phenomena. I find that there's lots of different reasons why they come in. Some people just want to feel that beautiful energy of spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
So I let them develop in their own speed, but that intention of sitting with spirit is what they have to do to begin with to come along to that.
Let's talk about the consistency and commitment to be at service and just leave everything behind you. And yes,
that's right.
The consistency every day, in and out meditations, and please.
Yes, that's very true. If you don't have the commitment to do it, you won't go very far. I've seen that time and time again with people who come in and think, well, I want it all now. It's not going to happen all now. You need that commitment to say, well, this is what I want. I want to give this time. It would be the same as if you went to a friend's house and you said, I want to spend time with this friend. And you have to have that commitment and say, well, I'm going to be there at a certain time. I'm going to be in the group at a certain time. Come in, get yourself settled. Try the best you can. When you first start, of course, you know that you can't get rid of all your thoughts that are going on in your mind. But you can build that up so that your intention and your actual commitment will help you to be able to make that connection. Immediately you sit down. The outside world no longer matters. You have to have that commitment. You also have to have the dedication. And sometimes it's very hard. You've got to be there at a certain time and the weather's really bad. Do you stay at home or do you go? It's very important that you go all the time. And having said that, of course, if you're ill, you can't. But to have that commitment it takes a lot. I can remember driving to Brunswick through storms because I wanted that time with that beautiful energy. And I wanted to be there for spirit.
And the thing is, it is a beautiful energy. I think that's what draws us. It's like the butterflies or it's like we're drawn to the light. And because when we sit in that energy and we feel it and we feel that unconditional love and the connection and it amplifies in a group energy.
Exactly.
It's really empowering. And it just reminds me too, Gaylene, 2 months ago when we chatted with Christine Gorichin, she kind of reminded Ella and myself that, one of the practices she did when she first started was just having 10 minutes to sit down and write and just be with spirit and talk to her guides and just write. And that kind of reminded of this consistency, like the same time on those same days, and they just knew it was like an appointment with spirit.
That's right.
And it was sacred time, but it just built this connection.
And it's very, very important with physical phenomena.
Yeah.
Because the energy is already there. We'd feel it as we'd walk in through the door. We'd be out in my lounge room. We'd walk into this meditation room. You could feel that spirit was there. They were already working and waiting for us. Yeah. So it's very important in that to be on time and to have that set time.
So it probably leads into the next one, which I know is an interesting one, but and I know it's something that you got a very strong message, and this is where you can share your interesting story.
Okay.
Is about prayer, because I know at one stage in your group you actually asked spirit, should we pray? So can you tell us about that story and what unfolded?
Well, it was I've been listening to a few mediums that had been saying that you didn't need to say the Lord's Prayer, that it was a Christian prayer. And I'd been brought up as a Christian and I'd always believed in that prayer. So this particular night we were coming in through the door and I just had a thought in my mind, should we be saying the Lord's Prayer before we do our meditation, which we always did. And forgot all about it. And we sat down through the night. We had a few knockings and things like that, but nothing major, because before an Apport comes into the room, as I said, there's this loud bang. And probably about an hour into the meditation, there was a great big bang. We had the lights very dim, so you could see nobody had moved, and we couldn't see anything falling or anything like that. When I turned the lights back on, we had 7 people in the circle, and we had a friend who we were sending healing to in Queensland. And in front of every person, and I can show you this, in front of every single person, there was one of these little things, which is a heart. You probably can't see it very well. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little copper heart, very thin. And there was one in the centre of the group as well. So there was 8. And, of course, we picked it up and you can't see anything. You can feel that there's something on it, but you don't know what it is. So we closed down, we did our closing prayer, we thanked Spirit, we thanked our loved ones. And when we went out of the room, we went and got a magnifying glass. And guess what was on that little heart? It's the full version of the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
So whenever I work with Spirit, that's what I use, the Lord's Prayer, because
and
Spirit's given it to me.
That's what I find amazing, because I've seen that heart in person. And maybe if you can hold it up to the screen again, because you can just kind of see the little print on it. You know, no human being could probably engrave a heart like that with the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. And it was 8, exactly the same.
8 exactly the same.
Yeah,
so this is what we talk about, evidence, getting real evidence that, hey, there's something more to this world, that there is a spirit world. And I just find that just so powerful.
That's right. And we found that all the way through, you know, other things that happened in the group, that they've got a wonderful sense of humour, Spirit. Because Lynn and I were talking one day about, you know, something or other, and we heard this bang, and Lynn said just very flippantly, "Oh, trust them to put their 2 cents worth in." Well, when we came back, there was 2 cents in the middle of the floor, 2 1-cent pieces in the middle of the floor. So they did things like that all the time. It was as if we're listening, we're there with you, we're giving healing, we're being with each one of you.
Yeah. So
it was fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic.
Can you take a photo of this little heart, please?
A photo?
Photo, yes, and send to us so we can share in our, class.
Of course. I can send you. I've got a record of all of our Apports. I've got them all.
Just out of interest, what have been some of the other ones that have stood out to you that they've sent through?
Well, one of them we have no idea why, but we were giving healing to one of our dogs, and we got this, which is weird.
Okay,
it was just in the middle of the room, and I thought, wow,
a little doggy's paw print almost on a piece of
exactly.
Kind of like...
Oh yeah, it was just there, and we had 7 of these little crosses, different colours.
Little crosses, okay. Oh wow.
Each different colours.
Yeah.
We had one each for each of us. So there was little crosses dropped into the room. We had shells, we had feathers. My favourite one is the little opal, which I don't know if you can see. It's very, very small, but that's a little opal.
Oh, wow, okay.
But I will send you a copy of all of these.
Yeah, nice.
And there's an amethyst, and we had a marble one day. Another day I think they were really having fun with us because they spread all these tiny, weeny little beads all over the floor, and it took me ages
just to
pick
clean them up. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was lots of things like that.
Yeah, good. And just the final thing I think tonight is, before we open up, and just see if there's any other questions before we come to a close, because it's been great so far learning about this a little bit more. But obviously one of the things, that in spiritualism and spiritual practice is about, some people call it sitting in the power or the life force, or that blending of energy between the spirit, the guide, and the medium. Can you just tell us a little bit about, how do you build that? How do you create that? And how do you develop that with your guide, that stronger blending of energy?
I think it happens over a long time, but it's through meditation. And it's being able to allow your mind to forget about outside things and have, again, that intention that I want to feel this energy. It builds gradually. And personally, for me, I found that because I'm a very logical person, it took me a long time to believe that what I was feeling was right.
Mm.
And I feel that you need to learn to have that trust, to start to feel the energy. And each guide will bring through a different energy, as you know, Liz.
Mm.
And Ella would know that too. Each guide will have a different vibration, but you build up a rapport with them. Some people don't know their guides' names. I do. And I wanted that because I needed confirmation. And as I told you about the guide before, I'd seen him and felt him, and a friend of mine drew him and gave me the picture, not knowing I'd seen him.
Mm.
And that was so much proof for me. And that it builds up. It's sort of like building a friendship with somebody. You gradually get to know them. You gradually learn to trust them till you get to a stage where you trust them with your life.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that, really. You've got to trust your guide with your life, because if you're going to go into manifestation circles, or you're going to go into something where you're in a trance, working as I do with forums that we do to bring back loved ones, I go into a very deep trance there. I'm aware of what's going on, but only just.
Yeah.
And you have to have that trust. And it's a matter of, again, having that intention and building it up gradually over time until you get to the stage where you totally trust them. You know that you're safe. Once you feel that energy around you, you know you're safe.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, thank you for sharing this tonight. I think it's just, it's just opening up, but it's nice for people because this area doesn't get talked about a lot, and there's not many people who've had experience with it. So really appreciate you sharing. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take us off pin and just open it up to the screen, and we'll just see if there's any questions. I know that task, which was about what Apports did you receive? And I think you've shared a couple of those already.
That's right.
But does anybody else, and this is where you can unmute if you want to, and if you feel like you have a question or you just want to put your hand up or show me, and we'll just see if anybody has it while Gaylene's here. So has anybody got any thoughts? Mark, yeah, fantastic. Mark, if you want to share.
Yeah, hi, Gaylene.
Hi, Mark.
You talked about having the ability to control communication with spirit.
Yes.
Can you please elaborate on that?
You have to put in place with your guides. Once you have that connection with your guide, you've built a certain connection with them, and you know that they're there. What I did personally was put Kalen in place of everything, and I say to him, you allow whoever needs to come through. So it's a matter of putting down the rules, in other words. You do that with anything. You've got to have rules. You can't just allow spirit to jump in any old time. If they came in and talked to me at 4 o'clock in the morning, I wouldn't be working with spirit, I can tell you. So you'd kick your friend out if they come over at 4 o'clock just to have a chat. You have to have that in place. Having said that, the guides can get through if there's an emergency, because it's happened to me once. But you have to have those rules in place, and you've got to be strict about it.
Yeah.
Like if you're not comfortable with an energy, you're feeling uncomfortable, and you think, oh yeah, but I've got to sit here because this guide's here. You don't. Guide will respect you, and they will respect your body. And if you are willing to let them do anything to you and make you feel uncomfortable and you've got pains everywhere, you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to keep that connection. So you put it in place. So when your guides first come in, if they're making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's okay to say to them, please step back, or please take this energy back, just a little. The guides will never step away from you. They will step back and they will respect you. If they don't respect you, you're working with the wrong guide. So you tell them to go away and bring somebody of a higher energy, of a higher purpose. So it's up to you. You're the one that's in charge, not spirit.
It's a very important concept you've mentioned there, because we're the ones who need to set that in. Sometimes we call them boundaries or guidelines with the spirit
Exactly.
world. I know I had to do it with my father after he passed. You know, he was bringing me people in the first year to rescue, do soul rescues for. And I had to say, Dad, thank you for bringing them. I know you're really kind. You want to help all these people up there, but this is not my role. And you know, there are plenty of other people, but this is not for me. And so he did. He learned, he listened, but I had to kind of set that in place. Can I just ask, Gaylene? I mean, you know, you mentioned your guide, your primary guide is the one who works with you with that. Do you have a separate doorkeeper or gatekeeper, or is your
Yes.
primary guide your main gatekeeper?
I believe there is a doorkeeper there. I've only felt him very, very close once when I'd asked for proof. And I believe that he is different to Kaylin. I think he's a different guide altogether. He allows Kaylin to come in. And once he's there, I leave it in his hand, because Spirit knows best who needs to come through for the people that I'm going to be reading for, or for the work that we're going to do. And as I said before, Kaylin isn't the guide that works with manifestation. I believe there's an Egyptian. I have felt her around, but it's more or less, you waste so much time if you're sort of thinking, okay, I need this guide or I need that guide. So what I do is I've put that intention in place. I've told him what I want, and he works with me because that's the way he knows that we can work well together. So it's a matter of you know, putting things in place and being strong about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Anybody else? Thank you for that question, Mark. Francis, good to have you join us too.
Haven't seen you for ages.
Likewise, Gaylene. Thank you. That was really fascinating. Many years ago, I sat in a little circle with my sister and another lady who was a psychic medium, and did have where she went into trance and started to channel these particular guides. And we sat in that type of circle regularly, and we recorded each of those sessions where these guides actually speak through her. I'm just wondering if you've done that as well.
We have. We did that in the beginning of sitting in the meditation circle. Well, it turned into the manifestation circle, but Lynn and I were sitting, and we had people there that we totally trusted, so we were all in meditation, and the guides would speak. And yes, I have done that. I think I've still got the tapes of them somewhere. But yeah, the guides would come through and speak, and we would tape it. And surprisingly enough, when you're really comfortable with the guides that you're working with, the voices aren't a lot different to your own, but you can sense the different words that they may use or something like that. So you know it's not the person speaking, it is the guides. Yeah, but they do use your voice box.
That's right. And also the lady that did the channeling would notice her temperature would change. So we'd always, she would be very cold afterwards, for instance.
I get the opposite. I get really hot. As soon as I sit, even when I'm taking the development class, I have to take cardigan off, I get hot. Lynn, she used to get really freezing feet. So I think they do that with different people. But yeah, I do feel that different energy and the different heat. I know that if I'm going to sit and allow my guide to speak through me, I take my cardigan off. Because if I don't, I'm boiling by the time I get back.
Part of me wants to know about the gratitude, how important it is that we will show gratitude to our guides, but also about the integrity.
Obviously, in the past, in history, there were a lot of people who used these kind of tools and energy for the wrong purpose. So it's the hard energy and the integrity that we bring to the work. So do you want to share a little bit about that, Gaylene, from your experience?
Yeah, I think it is very important to have that integrity. Personally, I put into place with my guides in the beginning that I would never take money if doing this, doing any of my spiritual work, unless I needed it. That was my personal thing. I believe that there are some people who do need to do that, but you've got to remember that you're doing it. You're a link between the spirit world and the loved ones. So that integrity has to be there, that you are doing it for the right purpose. If you're taking money for it, that's okay, as long as you are doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it to help the people that you're doing the readings for. And one of the other things that I always teach my students is you never, ever give anything negative to anybody. Because if you do that, they will dwell on that bit.
Yes.
So, yeah, you've got to have that integrity, and you've got to say, well, you know, I'm doing this for the right reading. If ever I found out that I was sort of starting to get a bit flippant with it, I do get flippant, believe me. My guide and I, sometimes I think he thinks, oh, here she goes again. We have great fun, but it's fun. It's not in the wrong context. So you've got to have that way of working. You'll get lower energies with you if you start to do the wrong thing, and you'll feel it. So, yeah.
And I think
it's hard to explain, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And it's interesting because it relates to what you said before about with the guides, and as you're blending in, if you're not feeling that energy and it's draining you, these are the things that we should be leaving people after a message or reading more fulfilled or with hope, not like
Exactly.
you said, because I don't think the spirit world would want that for people, you know,
No.
To have them drained or feeling angry or negative or focusing on that. So being
That's
discerning
right.
of that energy and keeping that awareness
Exactly.
there, very important.
Exactly.
So that's what's coming up. But look, tonight I just want to really thank you, Gaylene. I want to thank you for sharing from your heart. And I know you're somebody with a lot of integrity and authenticity, but also it's been nice to just hear of this connection with spirit. And like I said, it's the little evidences I think you've received from the Apports. And
Yes.
just you showing that to us, like that Lord's Prayer or that little plastic thing, if it was plastic with the dog footprint on it. I mean, you know, that's just this evidence that there's more to this world, that there's the spirit
That's right.
world, and that if we use these principles with the right energy, that we can really connect and really find some peace and also fulfill our purpose here. So can everybody give Gaylene a round of applause and just thank her for being here and giving up her night. But thank you very much. And to everyone else, thank you for joining us. And, you know, it's been great having your lovely faces with us, and hopefully you're taking away something tonight. And I know every time I go through the recordings, and if you attended tonight, you will get a copy of the recording, that there's always something in there that you can learn from. But some great wisdom. So thanks, Gaylene, once again.
No worries. Thanks for having me there, Les.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
And it was nice to meet you too, Ella, and all of you.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you,
fantastic. And
thank you for joining us.
And thank you to everyone joining us, and good night to you all, and enjoy. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, or at the workshop on the 3rd of June, or for our next Telos live class, which is on the 8th of June. Alrighty, bye for now, everyone. Take care. God bless, and have a good evening.